What's up guys, Sean here, and today we are descending back into the rabbit hole that is LeftTube to talk about yet another Innuendo Studios video and explain why this guy has a complete and utter inability to understand, much less address, the conservative position. Now before we get started, I did receive some criticism about my last video response to Innuendo Studios, and while most of that criticism was worthless criticism, a lot of it was also worthless criticism. For example, for some reason, possibly because people on the far left don't have any sense of humor whatsoever, the hilarity of me launching my Teespring store in the beginning of a video where I defend capitalism against somebody who is anti-capitalist was lost on the far left. So I just want to say, for those of you who are in my audience and are interested in designs like the Till Next Time design, which is available on my Teespring store, which will be linked in the description box of this video, don't go and buy that shirt and don't use the promo code DUMBPROMO for 10% off whatever you want to purchase in my store. Because honestly, according to them, capitalism is bad, and me promoting anything in a capitalistic way is also bad, so you guys going out and buying anything from me in a capitalist way where we voluntarily exchange goods for services is also bad. So please don't go to the store, don't use promo code DUMBPROMO, and definitely, and I mean definitely, don't go to the artist page, his Instagram, his Etsy store, and his Twitter and his Facebook, which are all linked in the description box below, and give the artist a follow, because they won't like that if you do that, so please don't. Now that we got all that stuff out of the way, there was another thing in that video that a lot of people in my audience pointed out to me that I didn't address in the video, and it's because I didn't realize it when I was watching the video. But apparently the conservative, the person playing the evil, cartoonish villain conservative in the Innuendo Studios video that I responded to, is voiced by Steve Shives.
There's always a bigger fish.
Now, I was gonna give comment on the fact that this person was voiced by Steve Shives, but I decided not to because before I even uploaded a single video on this YouTube channel, when I set up my Twitter accounts that were gonna be associated with this YouTube channel, I was already blocked by Steve Shives. And due to the fact that Steve Shives is somebody who blocked me before I ever had a chance to even interact with him, much less post a video response to anything he's ever done, I've decided to just leave that alone because Steve Shives has made it clear that if you have any disagreements whatsoever, he wants you to leave him alone. That being said, we're going to talk about a video that Innuendo Studios uploaded that I saw and was actually the first video that I was going to make a response to, and it is entitled "The Card Says Moops." And for those of you who are unawares, this of course is a reference to the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza was playing a trivia game against the Bubble Boy, and there was a misprint on the card, and George Costanza used the fact that it was a misprint to say that the Bubble Boy was wrong because the card said moops instead of mores. Now the reason I'm explaining the idea behind this video to you is because the overarching theme, the premise of this Innuendo Studios video, is that you never ever have to take a right-wing or conservative-leaning person at their word, because you can always just substitute what you think they're saying in place of that, because right-wing conservative people are disingenuous people who just try to win no matter what.
See, I don't take you at your word because I cannot form a coherent worldview out of the things you say. So forgive me if when you tell me what you believe, I don't think you're being candid with me. It kinda seems like you're playing games, and I'm the opposing team, and anyone who's against me is your ally. And you're not really taking a position, but claiming to believe in whatever would need to be true in order to score points against me.
Now, while there is some truth that a lot of people on the internet do argue in this way, and they don't really care about consistency or truth, they're just trying to win, it's important to note that this is far from a right-wing tactic or a conservative tactic. In fact, this is something that is often employed by the far left all the time. In fact, the number one strategy of the far left is to completely redefine words away from their common definition in order to excuse bad behavior on their side while condemning what they perceive to be bad behavior on your side. A perfect example of this is racism or sexism. The left has completely redefined those words in a way that they are not used in common parlance as a way to bludgeon their political opponents while still supporting people on their side who engage in terrible behavior and have horrific bigoted beliefs against people that they don't like. Now, the reason I'm taking so much time in my recent videos to discuss this phenomenon is because the perception among many leftists, and this is definitely true with the guy behind Innuendo Studios, is that you are always arguing in bad faith, and the fact that you have political disagreements with them isn't because you see the same issue in a different way and you just disagree on a solution. It's due to the fact that you are a bad person and you are inferior morally to them. And I have proof of this, because it turns out that Innuendo Studios isn't just some vague disembodied voice over poorly animated YouTube videos. There's actually a guy behind Innuendo Studios, and that guy has a name.
Will you be my girlfriend? No!
And his name is the guy behind Innuendo Studios. Okay, so I have no idea right now at the time of me filming this video what clip I decided to put in before this portion of the video, but I'm certain it's hilarious and that's why I'm laughing. But what I actually want to talk about is a speech that Innuendo Studios recently gave in front of a live audience in what looks like a college classroom, but honestly, I have no idea where he gave it.
There is a sense these days that if you say a person has bad politics, you're also saying that they're a bad person. Like, that if somebody votes for a shitty candidate, they're also probably like a shitty boyfriend. And to some degree, I think that's appropriate. Like, who a person is politically and who they are personally are not separate, and we shouldn't treat them as such. But, you know, the personal is political and all that. But if I still lived in the same city as my Tea Party friends, I don't doubt that they'd be the kinds of pals who would, no questions asked, call out of work to help me move on a Monday. But they'd also vote to take away my healthcare on a Tuesday. And the calculus by which someone weighs those two things to determine whether or not they're a good person just isn't that interesting to me. I don't think one of these things negates or redeems the other. People are more complicated than that. So I'm not in the business of judging a person's humanity. I'm also not going to pretend that taking away my healthcare isn't personal.
Now, I thought it was important to highlight this portion of the speech because I believe it tells us a lot about the person behind this video series that I'm critiquing and responding to. And it's this philosophy that is basically the antithesis of my political philosophy, that the personal is political. That even if somebody shows you consistently that they are a good person and they are to be relied upon, the fact that they vote what you perceive to be the incorrect way, in this case, a vote to take away your healthcare, whatever that means, makes them a bad person. Now, the reason I specifically highlight this issue is because it's incredibly absurd when you think about it. Because any vote, and I mean absolutely any vote, that changes anything about the healthcare system in any way, shape, or form could be interpreted as a vote to take away one's healthcare. For instance, a lot of people voted for Barack Obama, and when he was elected, those same people voted for a supermajority in the Senate and a majority in the House of Representatives. And Barack Obama's crowning achievement as president, his biggest legislative accomplishment, is undoubtedly the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. And what Obamacare was designed to do was to make plans that didn't cover all of the things that the House of Representatives and the Senate deemed that the plan should cover illegal. So effectively, if you had a healthcare plan that didn't meet the arbitrary standards laid out by the Democratic legislature and signed into law by Barack Obama pre-Obamacare, your healthcare was taken away by Barack Obama. Now, while a lot of people on the right point out accurately that Obama did lie when selling Obamacare, when he said if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan, when the entire point of the law was to make your plan illegal if it didn't meet the standards that Barack Obama wanted the plans to meet going forward. This is rarely presented by conservatives as a moral failing on the people who voted for Barack Obama, even though their vote was effectively one of the things that led to the Democratic legislature taking away their previously held health insurance plans. And that's because there's an acknowledgement among most people on the right that the people who vote for the Democratic Party genuinely believe that the policy prescriptions that the Democrats put forward will be better overall and don't see it as the Democrats being vindictive and wanting to take something away from conservatives. But Innuendo Studios does not grant conservatives that same courtesy. In fact, It's kind of odd because I would assume that the guy behind Innuendo Studios supports some version of Medicare for All. And one of the things that Medicare for All, by its very nature, has to do in order to be implemented is make private health insurance illegal. Which brings us to this weird impasse where people on the right believe that people on the left likely genuinely believe that a Medicare for All system is better and will be a better alternative to the current private healthcare system. But people on the left who are advocating for Medicare for All, which has to, by its very nature, as I said before, replace the private healthcare system, which means that they are taking away the private healthcare system, don't think that they're taking away your healthcare, but believe that you not supporting their policy prescription that doesn't even exist is you taking away their healthcare system. Now, the reason I bring all this stuff up is because it's important to have context in the person that we're talking about when we're critiquing their work, because once you understand their worldview, it's easier to understand why you can't communicate with them effectively. Like in this example that he puts forward in his own video.
Say, for the sake of argument, you're online blogging about a black journalist's commentary on marketing trends in video games, movies, and comic books. And you're saying how the vitriol in response to her fairly benign opinions reveals the deep-seated racism and misogyny in a number of fan communities, most especially those that lean right.
So according to the scenario, a non-white female put together a critique about marketing trends in video games and comic books, and then they received a lot of backlash due to their critique. Now, the leftist character, who is a stand-in for Innuendo Studios, says that the backlash to the opinions put forward by this person is due to the fact that there actually is a lot of racism and misogyny in those communities, and especially the ones that lean right, because we all know right-wing communities, misogynist, racist, etc.
When a right-leaning commenter pops in to say, or maybe they just actually disagree with her about marketing trends. For Christ's sake, there's no mystery here. People aren't speaking in coded language. They are telling you what they believe. She had a bad opinion. Why do you have to make it bigger than that? Why can't you ever take people at their word?
Now, what's funny about this is that the conservative in question that is supposedly defending racism and misogyny that we are never shown. In fact, we're never shown anything about the opinion put forward by this non-white female in the first place, because according to Innuendo Studios, it doesn't matter what she actually said and what the actual critiques of what she said are. The fact that she's a woman of color makes her immune from criticism in some way, shape, or form. But even with all that nonsense not included in the video, the conservative puts forward a pretty straightforward explanation. It could just be that people didn't like her opinion, and your subjective view about her opinion being benign doesn't mean anything, and your interpretation of critiques of that opinion as racism and misogyny could be more reflective about you than the actual people that are giving those opinions. But again, as we've shown in this video, disagreements about politics are reflections of poor moral character, and it's important to not take conservatives at their word, even when they're saying, just take me at my word, I'm telling you what I believe. Now, of course, rather than engaging with the actual point, this just sets up another role-playing, LARPing scenario for the leftists in the Innuendo Studios video, where he completely and utterly destroys the conservative, oh yeah, devastated. Even though when you break down this fast-paced takedown of conservatives, it completely falls apart with minimal scrutiny.
Heck with it. You're in a discoursing mood. Let's do this. Mr. Conservative. In order for me to take you at your words would have to show some consistency. Let me just lightning round a few questions about the reactionary web's positions on marketing trends. Do you believe that having the option to romance same-sex characters in an RPG turns the game into queer propaganda? Or do you believe that killing strippers in an action game can't be sexist because no one's making you do it?
You see, we're not even through one example before Innuendo Studio has to resort to strawmanning his opponent's positions. Number one, I don't care about having the option to have gay characters in video games. Most people don't care if that's an option in the video games. I acknowledge that some people do, but he juxtaposes this to the ability to kill strippers in the Hitman games, which if you're not savvy, you might let that slip by you. But if you are savvy like me, you'll know that Innuendo Studios just try to slip a straw man right past you without you noticing it. Because the reference that he's making is to an Anita Sarkeesian video where she claimed that the game Hitman actually rewarded you for going out of your way to kill strippers. And she claimed that because the game rewards you for this behavior, that is an example of the game incentivizing sexism. Now, one of the things that people who are critical of Anita Sarkeesian and her work pointed out was that the game does not reward you for killing strippers. In fact, they demote points from you for doing so. So she was framing the game in a way that was not accurate. That's what the response to that portion of the video was, and Innuendo Studios, of course, just decided to deliver a complete straw man about what the issue was.
Do you believe that the pervasiveness of sexualized young women in pop culture is just there because it sells, and that's capitalism, and we all need to deal with it? Or do you believe that a franchise has an obligation to cater to its core audience, even if diversifying beyond that audience is more profitable?
Again, we have another straw man. The idea that people are upset with the new Star Wars trilogy, the sequel trilogy, due to the fact that there are minorities in the movies is completely ridiculous. That's just something put on the fans by the studios and by the media because people aren't enjoying these movies as much as the studios would want these people to be enjoying the movies. People also don't like that you've taken something that had a timeless appeal, that was a space opera, it was good versus evil, it had a bunch of magic, and you've bogged it down with your intersectional feminism. The message of The Last Jedi is that the rebellion, people who are known for rebelling, should always follow orders from their superiors, and if they don't follow orders, that's somehow indicative of their sexism or their hatred for women, even if the women in the movie are shown to be completely incompetent. Furthermore, this isn't something new from the Star Wars fandom, and this isn't something unique to the sequel trilogy. The prequels, which were also not good movies, got a ton of hate, and a lot of that hate was focused on Jar Jar Binks, who's a cartoon rabbit, the kid Anakin, who's a white male, and the adult Anakin, who's also a white male. And on top of that, nobody is saying that Disney or Star Wars is obligated to placate the hardcore Star Wars fans. But the idea that it's more profitable not to is completely ridiculous. Star Wars, before Disney bought it, was already the second highest grossing IP behind Pokemon in the history of the world. It made over $40 billion, and that was largely not from the movies, it was from the merchandise. So while we're seeing a lot of box office success from a lot of the movies in everywhere except for Asia, because the Asian market has always been relatively disinterested in Star Wars, the merchandise sales are not where Disney wants them to be, and that's due to the fact that they've alienated their core fans.
Do you think words are inherently harmless and only oversensitive snowflakes would care about racialized language? Or do you think it's racist if someone calls you mayonnaise boy?
Again, another straw man. When people say that there's an oversensitivity in our society, that people are too quick to call things that are not racist or not sexist, racist or sexist, they're not saying that direct racial insults are not racist. They're not saying that direct sexist insults are not sexist. The example that he compared was a direct insult about somebody's skin color, which if you said that about a minority, the vast majority of conservatives would clearly call that racist.
And as long as I've got your ear, are you the party that believes in the right to keep and bear arms because you're distrustful of all authority and what if we need to overthrow the government someday? Or do you believe that cops are civil servants and we should trust their account of events whenever they shoot a black man for looking like he might have a gun?
Now, the next supposed contradiction that Innuendo Studios points out is this contradiction between people advocating for the Second Amendment, just in case we have to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government, and people thinking that the police are civil servants. But this isn't a contradiction at all. The Second Amendment was designed as a check against a tyrannical federal government. The police are a local government institution. We know who our police are. And the reason a lot of people aren't worried about local government tyranny or state government tyranny is because if your state becomes tyrannical or your state has policies that you just don't like, you can move away. If the federal government becomes tyrannical, then there's nowhere to go. You would have to flee the country or fight back against that tyrannical federal government.
Or do you believe that cops are civil servants and we should trust their account of events whenever they shoot a black man for looking like he might have a gun?
Now that I've shown that there's not a contradiction there, I want to zoom in on the example that Innuendo Studios wanted to show us. Because he said that conservatives just took Officer Darren Wilson's word about his account of events against a black person that he shot for maybe looking like he had a gun, which is absolutely and patently ridiculous. Now, what's funny about this example, other than the fact that it doesn't show in any way, shape, or form a contradiction in conservative logic, is that it shows a contradiction in Innuendo Studios' logic and a contradiction in the positions that Innuendo Studios has taken. I mean, this video starts out with a trigger warning to warn all the oversensitive people that he's going to show Darren Wilson's face throughout the course of this video. What I find interesting about this is that if you applied the logical construction of this video to Innuendo Studios' line of argumentation, then you would discover that he, of course, is the major hypocrite in this one.
I don't think you're being candid with me. It kinda seems like you're playing games, and I'm the opposing team, and anyone who's against me is your ally. And you're not really taking a position, but claiming to believe in whatever would need to be true in order to score points against me.
Because the Michael Brown picture with Officer Darren Wilson is a clear call to the Black Lives Matter movement, which says that our society doesn't value black lives the way that they should, and Innuendo Studios is somebody who does value those lives, and that's why he is supportive of the movement. But if that were the case, then why would Innuendo Studios frame the Michael Brown shooting in this manner? Why would he give a warning at the beginning of the video that he's going to show Officer Darren Wilson's face, when the forensic evidence supports Officer Darren Wilson's account of events completely? You see, it's actually a contradiction in logic for somebody to be an advocate for Black Lives Matter, for somebody to talk about the Michael Brown case in relation to Black Lives Matter, when they clearly didn't take the time to read the Department of Justice report on the death of Michael Brown. Because when you read that report, you'll find out that Officer Darren Wilson's account of events is completely supported by the forensic evidence and all of the reliable witnesses. And in fact, the idea that Mike Brown was shot because Officer Darren Wilson thought or felt like he had a gun is completely made up and ridiculous. Why would somebody who's an advocate for Black Lives Mattering make up reasons for why this black life ended? Now you might be thinking, whoa, Sean, it is completely unfair for you to say or imply that Innuendo Studios doesn't care about black lives and doesn't care about Michael Brown because he didn't read an 86-page report put out by the Department of Justice that shows that his crazy conspiracy theories about the Michael Brown case are completely unfounded. You can't expect somebody who values somebody's life and is willing to support a movement that supposedly values somebody's life to read 86 whole pages. That's not fair. It really should be, and they honestly cut it off because it's shorter. Black Lives Matter, unless, of course, there's some supplemental reading that I can't be bothered to actually go through. Now look, I think that's ridiculous, but because I'm in a generous mood, I'll grant you that. You can't expect somebody who cares about Michael Brown and cares about Black Lives Matter to read 86 whole pages, but can you expect them to read 8 pages? Because it takes 8 pages to get through the summary of evidence, which means if you just read the first 8 pages of the Department of Justice report, you would get an overview of all the forensic evidence that completely supports Officer Darren Wilson's account, and all of the analysis of the eyewitnesses that explain why the Department of Justice discounted certain eyewitnesses because they gave testimony that was directly in conflict with the forensic evidence. For instance, if you just read through the first 8 pages of the Department of Justice report, you would know that the wound on Michael Brown's hand could have only come from him reaching for Officer Darren Wilson's gun while he was in the police vehicle. And the reason we know that this is the only way he could have gotten that wound is because the wound not only had GSR, which is common when somebody's hand is within 12 inches of a gun, but it actually had scorch marks, which means his hand was even closer to the barrel. Furthermore, when the bullet exited Brown's hand, it ended up in the door panel of the patrol car. Now, the angle, the trajectory of the bullet indicates that Officer Wilson was at his holster when he fired that, which means that Brown had to be reaching for the gun in the holster at the time that that gunshot was fired, which means that Michael Brown was reaching for the gun. You would also know from those 8 pages that Michael Brown was not shot in the back, and he was not shot while he had his hands up due to the angle of the entrance wounds of the bullets on his body. You also would know, if you bothered to make it through 8 pages of the Department of Justice report, that while Mike Brown did initially run away from Officer Darren Wilson, Wilson pursued Brown. And when it became obvious that Mike Brown wasn't going to get away with Officer Wilson, according to the blood spatter evidence, he did turn around and run back towards Officer Darren Wilson. The blood spatter was further away from the patrol car than Mike Brown's body ended up being away from the patrol car. Also, the ballistic evidence indicates that Michael Brown was moving toward Officer Darren Wilson when he was shot by Wilson. This idea that there was this great distance between Officer Wilson and Michael Brown is not supported by the forensic evidence. The forensic evidence shows that they were on the same stretch of road when Brown was shot. The distance given in the Department of Justice report is a little bit more than 2 feet, not hundreds of feet or whatever the far left tells you about the myth of Mike Brown. Also, Brown was moving toward Wilson when Wilson was firing upon Brown. Officer Wilson never claimed that Michael Brown had a gun, nor did he claim that he thought Mike Brown had a gun. What he said, and what was supported by the forensic evidence and all of the reliable witnesses, is that when he tried to stop Mike Brown, Michael Brown punched him through the window of his car and then started reaching for his gun, which is supported by the ballistic evidence and by the bruise on Officer Wilson's face. But Innuendo Studios shows you none of that. In fact, he makes up a narrative that Officer Wilson never even put forward and presents it as the ridiculous reality that shows that there's an inherent conflict within conservative thought.
Do you believe that cops are civil servants and we should trust their account of events whenever they shoot a black man for looking like he might have a gun?
Now look, the reason I'm highlighting this point in this video, the reason I'm highlighting this video series overall, is because it's important to understand that when you stop believing that political disagreements are what they are, which are political disagreements, and you start thinking that they are indicative of the person disagreeing with you being evil, this is how you get to the position we are in society today. Innuendo Studios is selling you the idea of moral virtue, and he's telling you that it is immoral for you to listen to any conservative, any dissenting opinion, and to disagree with him no matter how fact-based your disagreement is, because disagreements aren't disagreements in politics. They are proof of your evil and your lack of moral character. The reason it's so obvious that he never even bothered to look at any of the forensic evidence related to the Michael Brown case is because he is religiously devoted to his political narrative. And any debunking of that narrative is sacrilege. And it's that religious devotion to falsehood, the idea that anybody who's introducing you contradictory information, no matter how fact-based, is doing so because they're evil and they're trying to shake you of your religious beliefs, that makes the far left so dangerous in this country. To the people who embrace the myth of Mike Brown, no amount of forensic evidence, not the 3 autopsies, not the 2 independent investigations, will shake them from their beliefs that Officer Darren Wilson was an evil white racist cop who killed Michael Brown because he was the evil white racist cop. And the idea that facts don't matter as long as those facts conflict with the leftist narrative is unfortunately the overall takeaway from this video. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Let me know if you have any ideas or theories on how to bridge the divide between the right and the left so we can have conversations with one another. I don't think facts will work, so I'm not sure what else you can possibly do, but let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. If you want to support me, you can buy something from my Teespring store. You can support me via one-time donations on Venmo or PayPal, or you can do so monthly through Patreon or Subscribestar. This has been me taking down yet another video or set of videos from Innuendo Studios. Till next time.